Welcome to Unhappy Times and Misplaces, in which I, Mr. Toby Haydock with an eye patch, gets a special guest to tell me their favourite things about a Doctor Who story, and I have to guess what those favourite things are, or have everyone shot.
Hi, Toby. It's thanks for having me on. For the multitudes out there who don't know me, my name's Jeremy Raddick, and I played Gareth in the Doctor Who TV movie. And for the past 25 years, I've been shamelessly exploiting that to get me into exciting predicaments like this. And now it's brought me here to my basement to talk to you about Inferno.
Well, welcome back. It's episode 3 of Inferno. I'm so excited. I actually just pressed play and then went, oh no, I need to do an introduction. Jeremy Raddick, who starred in the Doctor Who TV movie. Somebody who's been in Doctor Who. This is never going to fail to thrill me that my life intersects with those of people who are made up of stardust. You know, they are part of, even if a small part, they are part of Doctor Who's DNA. Nobody will ever take that away, and it thrills me when people who have that accolade next to their name would even respond to a summons from me. So I'm so delighted that Jeremy has done so, and has done so brilliantly. I almost took a break and went and tried to see if I could find an eye patch or at least change my cravat for a tie like Greg Sutton's about to do. But in the end, I actually was supposed to do a bit less work on my podcasts and stuff today, but I need to put something out. So I thought, well, I'll just do a quick trailer for what's coming up, and that took me all day. So I'm tired, and I didn't want to add to that by changing costume for what is largely an audio thing, although if you are listening to the audio version, some months later down the line, a video version will appear. If you're watching the video version, that's what this is. So look, it's episode 3. It's where Inferno starts to do the things that everybody talks about. So we've had a great time so far. So I can imagine things can only get better. And of course, in Doctor Who terms, that means worse. So press play in 3, 2, 1, now. So I'm watching on the special edition DVD, which looks better than Inferno ever has. I suspect if it goes onto Blu-ray, they might even make it look even better, because they seem to consistently come up with ways of improving the pictures. But I have to say, you could see sort of streaks of colour, and also there is a slight sort of blurriness to the movement and to the picture makeup that betrays its origins, that gives it a slightly different look. This stock footage from what was the guy called? I can't remember. I did know this once. The beautiful lava footage. Isn't lava amazing? It looks absolutely fantastic. But of course, it's boiling and it moves and it's like liquid fire. So it's great for science fiction. And it's wonderful for Doctor Who. So Doctor Who is on film there as he takes the console and conveniently Bessie. And this is where, of course, it's become a great staple of sci-fi now, where that if you have especially if you have something that has an ensemble of characters and 7 seasons, you got to do a couple of episodes where the actors get to play leather-clad lesbian versions of themselves. That's generally the thing, isn't it? And where the actors get to have a little bit of fun. I would say the actors don't particularly have fun here, because they play it deadly straight, and this doesn't have the same vibe as it might do for an American show like when Buffy and Deep Space Nine do it, which they do very, very effectively. Although with the obligatory leather and sapphic quotient. But as we will see, Although this, actually, a lot of this episode, it's interesting. I remember when I first saw this that it takes a while for the Doctor to realise, which again, coming in as a fan, when one knew that the main headline with Inferno was it's got the alternative world version. I was slightly impatient with it because I was wanting to see what that was like. But of course, in terms of when you're setting it up as part of the story, you do want, because the audience don't know what's happened. The Doctor has made an allusion to the fact that he'd done the time warp, but we don't know that one of these alternative worlds is a fascist state, etc., etc., and that is sort of seeded in very subtly. Yes, and Sir Keith's quite an important character. He's so nice, isn't he, Christopher Benjamin? He has such a gentle nature. And this is when the series is being slightly nicer towards people from the government. I mean, we're only one story away from Brown Rose, 3 away from Chin, and government officials get increasingly stupider and more broadly played as the series, as the Pertwee era continues. His hair gets more bouffant, and his dealings with ministers involves more affront as time goes on. But Sir Keith is nice, and I hadn't really sort of considered him much as a character because my first experience of Inferno was a Doctor Who episode guide in an old copy of Doctor Who magazine. Ah, yes, the Doctor has travelled to an alternative universe via the medium of the disco ball. Let's all meet up in an alternative universe. So I'd only read, I'd read the episode endings because in Doctor Who magazine, it either had the archives, which was a full sort of description of what happened in the story, which was exciting enough. I didn't get Doctor Who magazine very often, and I occasionally inherited or found copies. Or people who were chucking them out. Friends of mum at work say, we're chucking this out, do you want one? So I'd got very, very odd copies, and some of them were very yellowed and old, and it's clearly been through the wars and past owners. And I did have the one that had season 7 in it. And I remember sort of, the brigade leader featuring quite heavily, but he wasn't in the cast list. And of course, because I was so young when I was reading a lot of this stuff, I didn't really know what it meant. So I didn't actually know necessarily about the alternative universe element of it. I was quite confused because I think there's a bit where Benton threatens to shoot the Doctor. But that was my first experience. Now, the picture on the wall, Unity is Strength, is Jack Kine, head of the BBC Visual Effects Department. That is a bit of an in-joke. Jack Kine was actually a very nice man. I wrote to him about Quatermass. It was forwarded to him by the BBC Visual Effects Department, who, in fact, Matt Irvin of the BBC Visual Effects Department rang me up to say that they were going to forward it because I wrote care of, and told me about his thoughts and involvement with Quatermass. It's a testament to how brilliant Matt is. I was at school, by the way. I just got in from school when I got this phone call, and I spoke to Matt Irvin off of TV's Doctor Who and Swap Shop talking about TV's Doctor Who. And I wrote to Jack, and he sent me a tape with his memories of working on Quatermass. What a nice man. And he said some very encouraging words that I will always treasure. I like the logo for... it's obviously a sort of play on the swastika, although it does make me worry about road signs in the alternative Earth, because the fascist logo is 3 arrows pointing in different directions. So, I mean, how do you know when you're heading somewhere if that's just, a patriotic stamp or an actual direction? So I would say their graphic designers have perhaps need to get back to the drawing board and use a few less directions in their fascistic emojiing. So this is cheery Private Latimer, played by the cheerful-faced David Simeon, who was in episode 1, which we're expected to remember. And I love that about Doctor Who of this period, that we we remember things 3 weeks later. Now you'd have had a whole pre-title sequence showing pretty much all of his stuff as being important in order for it to resonate this week. Anyway, times a change. Is this the bit where Alan Chun's the stuntman, I think, gets hit by Bessie and was taken to hospital because he got hit by Bessie going at 35 miles an hour? And I think the story Chris Doyley John, production assistant, told was that if it wasn't him that told it, it was John Pertwee that told it, that Chunzi was sort of like, don't tell my wife. And also insisted on coming back to work because he didn't want Pertwee to feel bad for having hurt him. I love the stunt boys. I never met Chunzi. He looked like Charles Aznavour. He's the chauffeur in Seeds of Doom. Gets the odd speaking part. This is Roy Scammell. You could tell from his trademark blonde hair and the fact that he's going to fall off this. Roy Scammell falls off things. Even, I mean, when we did that documentary, he was 82 and he fell off something that I then had to fall off. But yeah, these stunt guys are really worth their weight in gold because they just bring added value to every shot that they're in, and it adds to the credibility having guys that are comfortable with all the physical stuff and all the charging about. Pardon me. I think it was Chris Doyley John's idea that John Pertwee hid in the bins as well, and I love that. Don't you love that? Don't you love that? That's just John Pertwee with a bin on his head. In fact, I don't think he's in a bin there, is he? I think that's a clever camera angle. Where yeah, so it's great because it gets the brilliant shot, but John doesn't have to get cabbage on his velvet. So this stuff is all great, and of course, yeah, I was impatient with it as a youth because since the Doctor Who magazine, I'd learnt about the alternative Earth. These angles are great, isn't it? Look at what this location affords you. Look at that. That's giddying, and if you don't like heights, that's a lot higher than the 18-foot I was on, and the 18-foot I was on was pretty scary. So yeah, I'm glad Jeremy and I both chose the location and the way that Camfield shoots it, because of course, yes, Camfield fell ill. Douglas Camfield, the director, fell ill. He had a heart condition. In fact, he died in 1984 at, I think, the age of about, I'm going to be terrified now, I think he might have been about 48, and I record this at the age of 47. God. And I feel like I've got a lot to do before my life is anywhere near complete. And of course, now I've always found the sort of, the fire extinguisher smoke of the movie Daleks rather comical, but we've established that these monsters are hot. So, of course, the coolness of a fire extinguisher is going to slow them down. So that's perfect. It gives you a visual. It's a cheap effect because it's just a fire extinguisher, but it's a cool-looking method of dispatch that makes absolute sense. Love the way that Derek Ware, again, it's the physicality that these guys have. I love the way that Derek, is not holding on to anything here. He does here as he slides down, but that's because he's leapt over it. And then he, staggers down this sort of incline, at the end of which is if your momentum carries you too much, you're going to hoik over that and fall off. I think this action stuff is so top drawer. And Roy Scammell is the fall guy. So Roy Scammell is actually doubling for another stuntman because they cast us, and that's Roy Scammell. So Roy Scammell shoots himself because Roy is the fall guy. So he does the fall here, and that is a cracking stunt that I think got into the Guinness Book of Records. That's a great shot from underneath where you can see all the stuntmen. Terry Walsh, Billy Horrigan there, Derek Martin, later famous in EastEnders. Derek's a lovely, lovely fella. But that's a brilliant stunt. Got into the Guinness Book of Records, but Roy was the fall guy, and also, you don't when an actor's playing a part, you wouldn't want them to do that fall anyway, because if the stuntman dies, you can still do the acting scenes with the actor if any need to be picked up, whereas you can't if the actor who's a stuntman dies. You have to be pragmatic in television. Now Liz's wig is different, isn't it, on location to the studio, and it's It's quite an alarming wig, that one. It's like she's borrowed it off a monoid. I have to say, I think she has and a bit of it's gone a bit skew-whiff. There's a bit sort of hanging out on the left-hand side. I think she has the better of it in the studio. But yeah, this is great because this is really intriguing stuff. Okay, why is Liz so severe and has different hair? I mean, Liz has always got different hair. We need to talk. Liz's hair changes more often than Quatermass's face, and they're both on television for the same amount of time. And this is the birth of one of the great Doctor Who anecdotes. Nicholas Courtney saying, when turning around and everybody else in the scene is wearing eye patches, and of course, being the unflappable professional that he was, he carried on acting because that's what he'd do. I love Nicholas Courtney. I love him as the... I think we sometimes take Nicholas Courtney for granted. I was talking about Ian Fairbairn. Nicholas Courtney always made himself available to fans, but also because the Brigadier is so likeable, and there's a certain decency that both the Brigadier and Nicholas Courtney, and a certain unflappability and a certain charm, which means that there's a lot of similarities between the character and the actor who played him, who we all came to know and love. It's easy to forget that he's a very good actor, and actually perhaps more versatile than we would think, because he so often got, because of his voice and height and looks and association with the Brigadier, often got the same sorts of parts. He's so good in this, and I love that Scar, and I love the fact that although Liz is the second lead, you know, the real kicker is actually the real difference in this alternative world. The big bad is actually the Brigadier, who's our dependable sidekick guy in because you need Liz to actually have that chink of humanity, and you know, she eventually becomes an ally with the Doctor. I love the fact that the Brigadier stays bad. Oh yes, and Jack Kine, being the big brother figure on the wall because he's head of the BBC Visual Effects Department, is also a nod to the fact that Jack Kine and his co-head and founder of the BBC Visual Effects Department, Bernard Wilkie, worked in 1954 on George Orwell's 1984 as adapted by Nigel Kneale and Rudolph Cartier, who had done the Quatermass serials on which Kine and Wilkie cut their teeth. And in that 1984, a BBC designer called Roy Oxley, his photo was used to play Big Brother. So that's a sort of nod to that as well. But Jack Kine was not a severe dictator kind of guy. He was a chucklesome, witty fellow. And I have, as I say, a tape recording. Some of that was used on the commentary for the Quatermass and the Blu-ray, where his character shines through. What a nice man he was, and very helpful. And he said some words to me, as I say, that I will not forget, because I was a kid, I was a teenager, and I think he sensed that, but he didn't come out and say it so much. But he said some words that when I was living out in the countryside in the middle of nowhere, and television and all of that seemed like a million miles away, and I, felt I didn't have what it took to get me anywhere, really. All I had were my dreams. He sort of told me they were achievable, and that meant a lot coming from somebody whose name had touched the credits of Doctor Who. Do you know what I mean? I've been very lucky like that. People are kind. We mustn't forget that. People are kind. And if you can be a positive impact on somebody's life, it really does make much more of an impression than if you're a negative one. So I guess the message is, don't be the Warp 2 version of yourself. Be the Warp 1 version of yourself. Because we all have. I mean, me too. We all have our dark sides, and we all can sometimes let the worst aspects of our personalities dictate our behaviour. Now, what's interesting is this isn't really overtly saying this so much. It just goes, this is a great wheeze. Let's have this as the storyline. Let's have everything a bit different. but it's a brilliant addition to the story. But it also, I think, does have a sort of profound underlying message, which, again, to its credit, it doesn't really sort of wag its finger at us too much about it. But it does, as I'm talking about it, I'm thinking about, how under different circumstances the worst of us are brought out. But actually what I love about Greg in particular is that, and he's not flawless, as established in episode 1, he can be a bit of a Berg. His innate goodness, his gutsy bravery shines through on both sides of the warp. I'm going to say the warp more about Inferno than I've never said it before. But I remember that, in the paperwork and stuff, the extras are for warp 1 and warp 2 and blah 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 blah. That noise is brilliant. Again, that's just so simple as something, because this is about the Earth screaming, isn't it? And the soundtrack screams, and there's that wonderful line later, isn't it? That's the sound of this planet screaming out its rage. And again, that's about stuff that is bubbling under the surface, that is an energy, but energy that can be, again, transformed into either good or bad. The transformation of the Earth's, the boiling energy inside the Earth into something sort of primal and dangerous and best left undisturbed is thrilling stuff. And again, there's something quite Quatermassey and Nigel Neely about all of the stories in season 7. And Nigel Neal's work is sometimes at its best when it thinks about things from the past that are buried and yet somehow still contain their power. And this is all about going too deep and disturbing things best left buried, because we bury dead things, but we're scared of dead things now. Real dead things are, of course, dead, and we bury them for hygiene purposes. But I guess the folklore is invented to go, no, bury them deep so that we don't get the diseases that come with a decaying corpse. But the folklore goes, no, bury them because death is scary and spooky, and we need to keep spirits down, which is a way of encouraging us to be hygienic, essentially, is the bottom line. But isn't it fascinating that we create scary stories around it? And there's a few religious things that are actually purely about practicality. He's got a real. This is a great line. Then you won't feel the bullets when we shoot you. That's funny, and he pitches it just right. It's a brilliant scar, though, when you look at it. It's a really simple but effective piece of makeup. And the subtle... I really like the costumes that the RSF guys have as well. There's always something about, Nazi versions of things that we like that we're sort of drawn to in drama, isn't there? I don't know why that is. And as that brilliant Mitchell and Webb sketch, as the baddies always have the sexiest costumes. But isn't this a brilliant? And we get to learn about this world, with Central Records, and actually that's the good thing about the story on both sides of the warp, is that Sir Keith Gold is having to answer to stuff that's going on in Whitehall, although it's a very contained and tense story set within this particular environment. The outside world is brought into play. We get the bigger picture, which of course we need to invoke, because the consequences of this story are not just to the people in the base. As a lot of Doctor Who stories, it's about that immediate environment getting breached by whatever is outside trying to get in. This is actually the opposite. It's what this unleashes will destroy the world. It still seems to me quite Camfield, camera setups. I'm not a great fan of Barry Letts's direction, which I find a little bit insipid. Actually, less so in the stories he doesn't produce. I actually quite like the direction of Android Invasion and Enemy of the World. I also sympathise with Derek Newick because he had a weak R, as I still have. It's I either disguise it or I've learnt to get rid of it. But for as a teenager, I thought I would never be able to be an actor because I regaled people with rough sounds like Rick from The Young Ones. I like that piece of Aikido. I think that the Doctor going, come and do the joke, and Benton putting his gun down is a bit hokey. I think it's a bit too cozy and lets the side down. That I think it would have probably benefited from a bit more caution and a bit less chumminess, because it dilutes the threat slightly. But it's a bit of fun, and Doctor Who should be fun. And it's not like this is a story that is glib and light-hearted most of the time. In fact, the way that they're, the extras milling about, running about, the sound. I mean, Newark is so good at keeping the tension up and the panic. He's got a blistering presence and an authentic. I mean, he'd been a serving soldier in North Africa, so he knew about. He was authentic. And I love this. Oh, there's Keith Ashley, a perennial extra who gets a credit as a Zygon. He's one of the 2 Zygons in Terror of the Zygons. I think that might be his only credit in Doctor Who. Oh, no, he's a Dalek in Destiny, but he's a perennial extra. Everybody liked Keith Ashley, and he was alive till about 10 years ago, and nobody interviewed him. I'd have been on him like a shot if I'd had the wherewithal. He's probably been dead longer than 10 years, 15. But yeah, Keith Ashley you can spot. He's an android invasion as well. He's the android that they've taken out of the capsule that starts throttling Sarah at one point. Anyway, I'm getting distracted by an extra. I mean, again, that wasn't. I remember reading that in the episode guide and thinking, that's not much of a cliffhanger. It's a great cliffhanger because it's lovely Sergeant Benton threatening to shoot the Doctor, and it's not just I'll shoot you now, it's also, and if I don't shoot you now, I'll take you outside, because there's a firing squad waiting for firing. There's something visceral and horrible about firing squads, and we were quite familiar with those as dramatic devices, but also as things that occurred in relatively recent history, with during the Second World War there was a lot of death by firing squad, so there were pictures or they were used in drama, and it's quite a grim thing, a firing squad. Well, of course that sounds like such a glib thing to say, but I just mean everything that goes with it, the visual and the what it is and what it stands for, but the fact that it wasn't unfamiliar as a visual, but you knew that it was rooted in reality, and that's what makes it sort of more frightening. That's a great episode, isn't it? What am I going to choose as my thing? Can I choose John Pertwee with the pin on his head? I can't. I think I'm going to choose... Well, I've got to choose the Alternative Earth storyline at some point. I've got to choose the Eye Patch story, or have I? I'm fond of the Eye Patch, because the Eye Patch story was... Or am I fond of it? Because there's a certain chumminess about us Doctor Who fans with our heroes that I'm not sure I approve of. I'm not sure. I'm so pleased I've met so many of my heroes, and in fact now call some people that have been in Doctor Who, friends of mine. I mean, I still can't quite get over that. I got an email from one the other day who said, you don't need to apologise for emailing me. I consider you a friend. And you go, oh, I don't like that. I actually think I slightly prefer to be slightly detached. I like a bit of magic. I like to deify people. I don't want people to be ordinary. I want them to be gods and monsters. But why I say that? Because the Eye Patch story is, when I think fans got a bit chummy with our heroes, going, oh, it's Nicholas Courtney doing the Eye Patch story. And I'm not sure I like that. So actually, but I cherish the Eye Patch story and the fact that such a nice man, Nicholas Courtney, told it and then knew it had become a bit of a cliche, and so was then very self-effacing about it. And all of that sort of helps to keep something alive that's a piece of television from 50 years ago. The fact that it sort of rumbles through the ages because it has a life beyond its existence as something that was on 7 Saturdays in a row several years ago. So it is part of the fabric of the wonderful world of Doctor Who. So yes, I vacillate with the Eye Patch story. for the reasons I've just outlined. I won't repeat myself. I'll break the habit of a lifetime. I think I summed that up enough. The alternative Earth. Now, I feel I should choose that now because I think Jeremy might choose it. But I feel I need to nod to the Havoc boys because of that stunt of Roy Scammell's there and the fact that, they fill out this era of the show. But I think they work particularly well with Douglas Camfield. I think their strengths intertwine. But they do give real added value to the Pertwee era. I think Jeremy might choose the alternative. And am I being sentimental choosing the Havoc guys? Oh. I'm going to choose Havoc. The Havoc boys, because of what their stunts bring, and particularly because that stunt off that gasometer is a phenomenal piece of work. I also love the fact that Roy Scammell shoots himself, but also Derek Ware's contribution to what he does, on top of that thing so bravely too, and the fact that he makes it look so easy. God, yeah. And the fact that you see those faces dotted about Billy Horrigan and Terry Walsh and Derek Martin and all those guys. You can just have hours of fun watching 70s Doctor Who and seeing if you can identify the stuntmen. Well, you might not be able to. I like doing that. I like doing that more than I like doing exercise. Right, what is Jeremy's favourite thing?
Hello, I am Brigade Under Leader Radek, and this evening, a strange duplicate of myself appeared in my home in the midst of a experimental drilling project taking place in my backyard. This man kept blathering on about being from another world, and he was in the midst of recording something for a podcast video, it was unclear, called Happy Times and Places for someone named Toby, who I can only assume is some kind of spy. All he had on him was this video disc copy of an ancient television series called Doctor Who Inferno. And this man asked me to watch that video as evidence and record my thoughts on the episodes I saw, and I saw no reason not to humor him. To be honest, I was intrigued. Well, clearly the best thing about this particular episode are the duplicates of Elizabeth Shaw and the Brigadier. Those are clearly this gentleman's favorite things about that episode, and I would have to concur. Seeing these previously stalwart characters become twisted and evil, I'm doing air quotes for those of you listening and not viewing this video testimonial, evil, whatever that may be. The duplicate Jeremy seemed somewhat chilled at the line, "Then you won't feel the bullets when we shoot you." That seemed to him to be a rather horrifying and chilling line, well delivered. I thought it was a cool line, personally. Didn't see what the problem was. Anyway, yes, definitely my favorite things about the episode were the cool and definitely improved evil duplicates of those boring goody-goodies in the other world. Moving on, I will continue my report once we return with the subsequent episode. Thank you.
I'm falling more in love with Jeremy Radek as this goes on. For those of you listening, his contribution there began with him turning around in the chair, and he has a moustache and an eye patch and a Unity of Strength poster in the background. So there's a reason to come rushing to the video when it comes out a bit further down the line. I'm the stupidest man on this earth and any alternative iterations. Of course he was going to choose the alternative Earth or some aspect of it. To be fair, he chose the duplicates, but of course he was going to. So why did I not try and succeed. I always snatch victory from the jaws of my own defeat. Story of my life. But I'm trying not to care because this is only a podcast and it doesn't really matter. But I'm really annoyed with myself. But I mean, of all the episodes where the most likely thing to be chosen was screamingly obvious. In fact, I can't think of any other episode of Doctor Who that has a more obvious thing to choose as its best thing than the alternative Earth aspect of Inferno, which makes its debut in episode 3. I'm an absolute arse. So I've faltered in my I was going to say I've squandered my lead. I've squandered my tie, because that's as good as I can hope for. Which is ironic, because actually more people are wearing a tie in the alternative Earth, although they're not. No, I've done a Professor Stallman. I've got rid of my tie in order to... Well, I celebrated the Havoc Boys, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you go for sentiment when you should use clear logic. And that means I'm very much part of, I think, the universe of episodes 1 and 2 in the reality that I inhabit. And perhaps in order to have chosen episode 3, I needed to have a shave, put on a tie, and and live under a fascist regime, and then I would have chosen the alternative universe. So listeners to the alternative universe version of this podcast, which is called Unhappy Places and Times, I'll probably have done better. I'll probably have done better in that version. But it's not the end of the world. Well, not in this universe. Yeah. So actually, the laugh's on you. God bless Jeremy Radic. I can't wait to see what he's got in store for episode 4. But for now, well, look. May you always have an eye patch story in your life, because sometimes the familiar is comforting. I'll speak to you next time. Thanks very much for watching and listening. Thanks so much to Jeremy. What a guy. Come join me for episode 4. Ta-ta. Thank you for listening to Unhappy Times and Misplaces, an alternative universe version of Happy Times and Places, with me, Toby Haydock, with an eye patch, and my special guest, Jeremy Radic, on Twitter @JeremyRadic. We would like to acknowledge those forced to patronise this podcast at gunpoint. We have their families. They are Lisa Gledhill with an eye patch, Charles Gears with an eye patch, David Gillespie with an eye patch, Andrew East with an eye patch, Paul Dykes with an eye patch, Tim Dickinson with an eye patch, Robert Davis with an eye patch, Rob Dawson with an eye patch, Matt Dale with an eye patch, Dave Curran with an eye patch, Peter Crocker with an eye patch, Paul Cornell with an eye patch, Paul Cornaghi with an eye patch, Charles Coffin with an eye patch, Steve Churchill with an eye patch, and Susan Christian with a different haircut. The music for this podcast is by Dave Gates, and the podcast artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to prove that unity is strength, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock and become a patron for as little as £3 a month. Those patrons, they're several months ahead in the drilling. I mean, podcasts. And they also get exclusive and bonus material. And, of course, my never-ending thanks. If you can't subscribe or don't fancy that, there's the Ko-fi option, ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock, where you can do a one-off payment as and when you like. And look, I know times are tough, so I'm just grateful to you for listening. But what costs nothing is to go to your podcast outlet and to give this podcast 5 stars and perhaps a couple of sentences to say what you like about it, if you do like it. I mean, if you don't like it, just stop listening and go and be nice about something else elsewhere. But if you do like it, it really helps with all that stuff out there. If I've got 5 juicy stars and some nice things being said, it helps to make my algorithms just look wonderful. And I'm very grateful if you can do that. I also have a website, www.tobyhadoke.com. I'm regularly in Manchester performing live comedy on a Tuesday night at the long-running comedy club XS Malarkey, which can also be found online every month from August 2021 on the first Sunday of the month on twitch.tv/XS Malarkey.